Welcome to class. I'm Trevor, and I post D&D videos every week, generally on Wednesdays. In this video, which is the second in Feywild month, I want to talk about the Magic the Gathering set that I think most closely resembles the Feywild from Dungeons & Dragons, and how we can kind of beg and borrow and pull and steal from it to create Homebrew for the Feywild. Now, let's get into what set that is. Your initial guess may have been Throne of Eldraine. It's more recent than the set that I'm actually going to talk about, and it is certainly inspired by folklore and fairy tales. But I don't think that it is the best representation Magic has for a Feywild. I think that award goes to Lorywn. I love this set. I have to be honest and get that out there because I definitely have a preference for Lorywn. It's when I restarted playing Magic for the first time. And it's beautiful. I have so many great memories about hanging out with my friends and going to pre-releases and all that jazz. For those of you who are unaware, Lorywn was part of a 4-set mini block. It's a little bit complicated, but here's how it worked. Lorywn was paired with Morningtide, and these two sets took place on the plane of Lorywn, which was in Eternal Day. And it was this loosely Celtic-inspired, folklore-inspired set, and there was a lot of, tribal matters cards, and I'll get to what tribes were on Lorywn later in this video. And then after Morningtide, things changed. We were still in the plane of Lorywn, but now it was Shadowmoor, and the next two sets were Shadowmoor and Eventide. And there was this paralleling or mirroring that happened where the whimsical, positive, fun-loving, chaotic Lorywn set turned into this more grim, darker, not quite like horror, but much darker, much more mischievous set of Shadowmoor and Eventide. And the constant day of Lorywn turned to night. I think this is a really fun reimagining or reflavoring of the Feywild and Shadowfell. Now, obviously, in D&D, the Feywild and Shadowfell are literally different places, but I think that there is enough here to pull from and tweak and borrow that it's close. Now, I'm not going to talk about Shadowmoor and Eventide too much more in this video. I think those are better off left for a more Shadowfell-focused video, and this month is Feywild month. But I wanted to set the scene before I delved into what Lorywn has to offer for homebrewing a game that is going to be related to or venture into the Feywild. So let's get into it. Lorywn was a tribal matter set in Magic the Gathering, which means the cards had essentially the D&D equivalent of race class combinations that were relevant in the mechanics of the game. And on Lorywn, there were also no humans. I think that this helped amp up that sense of wonder and mystery for the plane. And we'll start at the top, right? So there were Kithkin. Now, Kithkin were essentially halflings, and one of the more famous Kithkin cards was Gaddock Teeg. He's this legendary Kithkin that is pretty well known, and his card would prevent larger spells from being cast and kind of tax spells as they were being cast. In addition to Kithkin, we also had Marrow or Merfolk, and the Merfolk in Lorywn were kind of political and about commerce. There were these very intricate pathways and trading lines between Merfolk communities. Sig River Guide was one of the more famous in terms of lore, Marrow or Merfolk. We had Treefolk as a big factor in Lorywn as well, and Doran the Siege Tower was one of those Treefolk, the leader and the probably pretty still to this day well-known Treefolk from the set. There were giants, and Brian Stoutarm was one of the big higher-ups in the giant set. He kind of illustrates what the giants tended to do. Flamekin, which were these elemental, they kind of are like Fire Genasi, but they're these elemental creatures that are embodiments of fire, and Ashling the Pilgrim is an example of these Flamekin. There were fairies. Now, the legendary fairy from Lorywn was Widewind the Biting Gale, definitely not one of the most famous fairies, and as a matter of fact, in competitive Magic at this time, the fairies deck was a really popular one, but that's neither here nor there. Boggarts were the goblins of Lorywn, and Wart Boggart Auntie was the kind of mother goblin, and you could kind of see how the goblins treated each other and a lot of the relationship between these goblins from her card. There were elves, and the elves in Lorywn valued beauty and perfection. That is the most Fey thing, right? That is very much Feywild. Nath the Gitleaf is one of these elves. And then we also had changelings, which are, they're just that. They were all of these different like tribes, and they could shape change to just like 5e changelings. And then there were elementals, which were sometimes the embodiment of spell effects, like terror, and sometimes there are embodiments of like kind of just thoughts or feelings like vigor or guile. Before I wrap up the video, I want to talk about what we can homebrew from Lorywn for games that would take place on the Feywild or venture into the Feywild. So I found 4 cards that would work as really excellent plot hooks for campaigns that venture into the Feywild. And the first one is Crib Swap. Crib Swap pictures a family finding out that their child has been replaced by a changeling, and this actually directly works in a 5e campaign. The DM could have the players hear screams from a family and theoretically rush over to help them. And the family could explain that their child is not their child. Their child is this other creature, this other entity that keeps changing forms. And the players could then have to venture into the Feywild and find who took the child. Maybe it was a coven of hags who are trying to create a new hag, or whatever the case may be. But I think that this is just an excellent way to plant that seed of chaos that easily would slip into a Feywild themed adventure. The second one is this card, 1,000 Year Elixir. Now, this card gives like ability haste in a way in Magic the Gathering, and I think that this could be a potion that maybe a powerful wizard wants to help give them more time. Maybe it slows the time around them. Time is a big factor, like I talked about in the Feywild primer video. Time is a big factor. Time doesn't work the same way in the Feywild as it does in the material plane, so maybe this elixir is just like concentrated essence of Feywild that manipulates time differently. So if you bring back some of this to the material plane, you can get twice as long to do things, and maybe it could have dangerous side effects or what have you, but I think it'd be just a fun way. And obviously it could have some dangers if you take it too far and get into time travel territory, but just as a way to like extend someone's lifetime or ability to study or what have you, I think it just seems really interesting. For the third card, we have Dolmen Gate, and this is a card that stops creatures from dealing combat damage to each other. I think that this is awesome. This could be in the Feywild, an area where there is constant war, but it's literally constant. It never stops because the creatures are never actually inflicting damage upon one another, and the party has to figure out how to solve this problem in a more diplomatic way. Or this could be a fetch quest where the PCs have to help a peace cleric by getting this Dolmen Gate or getting the materials to bring back and build a parallel to one in the material plane, in order to stop a conflict between two nations or groups that is just causing casualty after casualty. And finally, we have Thorn of Amethyst. This is a card that makes other cards cost more when you're playing them in a game of Magic. And I think that this could be a really interesting, even if it's just an effect while the players are in the Feywild, where like spells that they cast cost the next spell slot up. Or it could be something that the players, again, have to go get. They have to find this item for a powerful wizard or a warlock. It could potentially be they have to find it for a wizard or a warlock who is actually evil and going to like harness this power and use it poorly, and they're kind of trying to dupe the party. Or they could have to use it to stop a group of mages and tax them further. But the only place to find this powerful magic artifact is in the Feywild. Right, so if there's this group of mages that are trying to cast these spells to control an entire town, well, if they bring back a Thorn of Amethyst and plant it in the town, then maybe the town is protected from these mages while they can go around and pick off these mages and deal with this conflict. I've always loved Lorywn. Ever since I got back into Magic, this set has been very special for me. So this video was an especially fun one to make. I may make some full videos or some shorts with some homebrew ideas for different cards from Lorywn and Morningtide that would fit into Feywild themed campaigns. No promises on that one, but it's an idea that I'm mulling over. I do have more videos coming out in Feywild month. If you have suggestions or any questions or comments, please leave them in the comments down below. If you like this kind of content and want to see what else I have to deal with the Feywild, subscribe to the channel. And as I always say, be safe. Make smart life choices.